We're back. I should say he's back. Sidekick as well. Bill Land along with Sean Elliott for scatter shooting. Sean, as we tape this, just 4 games to go in the season. Spurs trying to get a little rhythm back with their ball club and a little momentum, yet they're sitting without Manu Ginobili, without Boris Diaw. Stephen Jackson is gone, and none of those 3 will be available to start the playoffs. What does that do to Pop and the coaches as far as developing their rotation and getting set for the postseason?
Puts a ton of pressure on him, I tell you that much, especially without having Manu Ginobili, because he's another playmaker. He sets the table for everybody else out there, and when you don't have Tony Parker on the floor, he can become your primary ball handler. That means other guys are going to get greater responsibilities. Number 1, Kawhi Leonard. With Stephen Jackson being gone now, and you talked about Manu being out, he's going to have to help us more on the glass, and he's going to have to help us more scoring the basketball. He's got to have a lot more responsibility on him now to score, and I think he's ready for it. And furthermore, he's got to play a lot more minutes. He's a young guy. It should be his senior year in college right now. He should be able to play 35-plus minutes from here on out.
Tony Parker and Tim Duncan, they know what's ahead. We know what to expect from them. Is there a problem with someone else maybe trying to do too much instead of just trying to be a little bit better at what they're doing?
I think that always creeps into it. But I think you'd see that primarily with your 2 big stars trying to pick up the slack for Manu Ginobili. And I just think that if they trust in their teammates and they move the ball, they can still continue to try to dominate and take over when you can. But you got to find that balance. You got to trust in your teammates. And I think if those 2 guys, Tim Duncan and Tony Parker, can do that in the absence of Manu Ginobili, I think other guys will naturally rise to the top and pick their games up.
Also seems that maybe nationally people are looking at the Spurs now going, this club struggled a little bit, they got some injuries. Maybe the silver and black gets into that underdog role once again.
You know, that wouldn't hurt us, to be honest with you, and that's a great point. You know, we've been looked at as the bullies for so long until we get to Oklahoma City or teams of that nature. We might be considered an underdog, not having so many pieces to start a playoff series and playing maybe a red-hot Houston team or a red-hot Golden State team. You never know how this last week will shake out. So maybe also this gives our guys a little bit of an edge, because sometimes when you have multiple injuries, it brings the entire focus up.
All right. What city the Spurs could be going to as the best golf courses? I guess that's your preference, right?
San Fran wouldn't be bad at all. I think there's Olympias out there, so I can get some rounds in.
Heck with the team. It's all about this guy, right? We'll see you on the next edition of Scatter Shooting.
Hey Spurs fans, and welcome to another episode of the News 4 San Antonio Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, and fan favorite Stephen Jackson has been waived. However, what does this mean for the Spurs as they head on into the playoffs, which is just days away? To talk about this and more, I'm joined by Karl Boenitz of ProjectSpurs.com and our guest, Ari Temkin of 1250 ESPN, The Hardline. Ari, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks for having me.
Boy, you came at a great show, didn't you? I mean, with a lot of people.
Anything happen?
You know, little things happen. You know, I don't know. We might have a few minutes to talk about a few things. But, yeah, in case you've been living under a rock, Stephen Jackson has been waived by the San Antonio Spurs just days before the playoffs are about to kick off. It pretty much sent shockwaves throughout the NBA world and Spurs fans, and we're going to give our reactions right away. Ari, your first reaction when you saw the news?
Well, you know, Stephen Jackson came in last year, and you know he brought a strength, an attitude to the lineup that they just hadn't had prior to his arrival, at least recently. And he brought a swagger to the team, and it was found right away. And he was knocking down shots, and he played well. But this season he's shooting 28% from 3. He has not been good, and it apparently became too much for Pop and the organization, because you knew Stephen Jackson had an attitude and a swagger that was good on the floor, but not necessarily good off the floor, and that eventually caught up with him, and at some point just wasn't worth the headache that he brings.
Now, according to the report from Yahoo Sports, who broke it, Jackson had been sparring with Popovich regarding playing time. Don't you think, Pop might have told him about his role heading into this new season?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen much from Stephen Jackson, and when the news came out, I was surprised, not because of what Stephen brings to the team, but because it's so late in the season, and I wouldn't think you'd want to mix things up this late in the season, this close to playoffs. But if his main contribution to the team is an energy, and he's on the bench waving the towel with Patty Mills, and he gets the team fired up. If he's not bringing that anymore, and instead it turns it into a negative, and he's complaining, whining, whatever, then I'm not surprised the Spurs let him go.
He did not join the Spurs on the recent trip to Denver. That was your first sign that maybe something was going on. So when we found out it was about playing time, okay, I get it. Know your role, Steven Jackson. That Pop probably would have said that to him. But however, what is the difference between him and maybe a guy like DeJuan Blair, who vocally goes on social media and complains about playing time?
I think playing time is different than being vocal about other things. We saw him Instagram a picture of his ankle in the locker room, and it's little things here or there. And, you guys brought it up, the fact that, well, how could you pull a move like this late in the season? Well, I think that tells you that there had to be something that was going on behind the scenes that the Spurs organization, Pop and RC Buford specifically said.
And it's got to be that locker room chemistry. Yeah. I mean, Pop and the coaching staff and a guy like Buford, they're going to want that chemistry solid and right. So that tells me maybe he was being a little disruptive.
It's possible. I mean, we all know how disciplined and how strict Pop can be about these types of things. And if some guy who's not bringing much to the team otherwise, like Steven Jackson, is messing things up, then, he's got to go.
Here's the reality with the Spurs. They pride themselves in being able to control the message. Pop is always very calculated in the messages he brings to the table with the media. Steven Jackson's not like that. So they can't, Tim Duncan and Ginobili and Parker, they play into that control of the message that the Spurs want the fans and those in the media to understand. Mm-hmm. And Steven Jackson went really counter to that type of culture. So at some point when you're shooting 28% from three, you're being vocal about how you're not getting enough playing time, and you're not buying into this control of the message outwardly with the media, in other words, then you become expendable.
Right. Well, now that he's gone, now the question is, how much of an impact is this going to be on the Spurs as they head into the playoffs? And let's just be honest, this team is looking a little thin right now, at least at this very moment. You have Tony Parker, who just came back from an injury. He looks great so far. Let's hope he doesn't. No, don't jinx it. I'm not trying to jinx it, everybody. Then you got Boris Diaw, who just had surgery on his back. Now you got the loss of Steven Jackson. And then you got not that great of a strong bench, still in my opinion, a young guy like Baines and Corey. Are you a little concerned about this, and do you think the impact of Jackson being gone is going to affect them?
See, it's funny that you bring up the injuries, because that's what was most surprising to me, is how much this team is struggling with injuries, and they're just willing to let somebody go for nothing and just get them off the roster. But honestly, I don't think he was bringing enough to the team. And once the Spurs get to the playoffs, he wasn't going to be playing much at all. I remember when the Spurs played the Thunder in San Antonio, and I felt like he was a nice complement to Kawhi Leonard as a defensive stopper. But when it comes down to it, if the Spurs are going to play the Thunder in the playoffs, it's going to come down to Kawhi Leonard being the defensive stopper, not relying on Steven Jackson as a backup. So I don't think he was going to bring much to the table.
Obviously, health is just so important, it's paramount. If Parker's not healthy, then this team could lose in the first or second round, early. But think back to last season, how good their bench was. What did that mean for them in the playoffs? I mean, at some point, there's a reason why these guys play on the bench and that they're not starters elsewhere. I mean, it's a regression to the mean for a lot of these guys that overperformed throughout the season last year and then came back down to earth in the second season. The key this year is same roster from last season. What's different? Well, let's hope Danny Green performs better in the postseason. He needs to be able to shoot the ball particularly well from three to help space the floor. Kawhi Leonard has been better. And Tiago Splitter, here's a guy that if he can play the way he has at some points this season and give the Spurs another interior threat, and aside from Duncan, that's going to be the difference for them this season.
And I guess my concern is, we're talking about the bench now being a little thin now with the loss of Jackson. You just mentioned it. Danny Green did not have a great showing last season in the playoffs. Then you got Matt Bonner, and we all know about his history in the playoffs. You got a very young Baines, very young Corey Joseph, Gary Neal, up and down, up and down. So I think the impact is going to be felt a little bit. Yes, okay, maybe he wasn't bringing the numbers. Maybe his shooting was atrocious. But hey, you had a guy you can throw at a guy like a Kevin Durant. You had a guy you can throw at the best, low post guy. Steven Jackson would take that on. I think that's where you're going to feel the hit the most.
Yeah, and obviously health plays a role in that. But Gary Neal's been injured a lot this year, and now it seems like he's finally coming back. I mean, he's playing his best ball right now, which kind of has been underscored because the Spurs have been playing well. But you know, if the difference between winning a title and not winning a title is Steven Jackson, then you guys had, I mean,
Right.
the Spurs had a bunch of problems.
So you're not worried that the Spurs do not have anybody to back up Kawhi Leonard?
No, I mean, Ari was saying before the show, if Kawhi Leonard goes down, then the Spurs are in trouble as it is, and that goes for a number. Like that goes for Tony Parker, that goes for Tim Duncan. You just have to hope all those guys stay healthy.
Right.
You can't just keep around Steven Jackson, hope
Sure.
like just in case Kawhi Leonard gets injured.
Well, right now the Spurs are on this. At least they clinched the second seed. They can do no worse than number 2. There is still a fighting chance for the number 1 seed. I believe OKC has the tiebreaker even if they win out. The Spurs could possibly play maybe 3 teams: the Lakers, the Jazz, the Rockets. Of the 3, who do you want? And it's pretty obvious.
It's pretty
Yes.
obviously the Jazz, I think. Well, I said the Jazz before Kobe got injured. Now I feel like the Jazz and Lakers are pretty much it's you know, sweep 5 games either way for the
sweep,
Spurs.
really?
Yeah, against the Lakers without Kobe or the Jazz, I say sweep or 5 games.
Really? I mean, even with a LA team that has a tandem of Howard and Gasol still there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason they're fighting for an 8 seed. I mean, they have underperformed all year. It's amazing the way we kind of all, throughout the season, been like, well, at some point they'll snap out of it. It's the Lakers. But they haven't. You know, they've been fighting all year for the 8 seed. They are what they are. And with Kobe, without Kobe, you know, if you're the Spurs, you wanted the Lakers. Now, it's more attractive without Kobe.
Right.
But, you know, when Kobe was healthy and the Lakers were clinging to that 8 seed, there were a lot of Spurs fans that said, well, let's not get the 1 seed. Let's go for the 2 seed. To me, you know, if you're not good enough to beat the Lakers or the Rockets, you know, the key for the Spurs is...
Beating the Lakers with or without Kobe?
Yeah.
Okay.
The key for the Spurs is they've lost 6 of their last 7 in Oklahoma City. So what's more important?
Right.
Who you play in the first round, or what gives you the best edge to beat Oklahoma City in the Western Conference Finals?
Sure.
Because if Parker is healthy, I've said this all year, if Parker is healthy, the Spurs are going to play for the Western Conference Finals. If Parker's healthy.
Right. Right. And of course, you know, if you know, we know there's nothing wrong to Tim Duncan. Let's hope not. He's been playing phenomenal this year, and of course Kawhi Leonard as well. But leave your thoughts over at ProjectSpurs.com and of course at News 4 San Antonio, and tell us what you think not only about waiving of Steven Jackson, but the Spurs and who you would like to see them play heading into the playoffs. But before we close, Ari, what's going on over at 1250 ESPN The Hardline?
Oh, we got, you know, a good week of shows coming up as
Right.
we close out the regular season, and you know, 1250 ESPN San Antonio, now home of the Texas Rangers and Dallas Cowboys, so we're excited.
And y'all hearing y'all calling the Talons games too.
Yeah. Eric Messersmith was just in Tampa.
Yeah. Oh, poor him.
Tough life.
Oh no, not
Tough life.
Tampa covering an arena football league. But yeah, so when does the air on the radio now?
The
Hardline.
Hardline 2 to 4 Monday through Friday.
All right, and where can people find you on the internet?
ESPNSA.com.
All right, well, go out to ESPNSA.com and check out what Ari and Eric have to say about the Spurs and pretty much all local Texas teams and national teams. And of course, ProjectSpurs.com. But for Karl Boenitz and Ari Temkin, I am Jeff Garcia. Thanks for watching once again this episode of the News 4 San Antonio Spurs Roundtable.